want to introduce myself first. My name is Rick Smith, Managing Director and Founder, CrossCut Ventures, early stage venture fund based here in Venice, California. Eric Garcetti would be happy to hear that. He just came back to say hi. I want to thank the Milken Institute and Ellen Grasso for giving us one of their rings of their 12-ring circus to focus on a topic that's very important to us at CrossCut, and I think to the venture industry, and that's the rise of female founders in driving global growth. We want to take a look at that today. We want to look at why I think female founders have lacked some of the access to capital that their male counterparts have had, and really spend some time, this conference is about looking to the future, spend some time talking about what can be done better, because the industry right now has not done a good enough job. At a time when a woman's being put on the currency, a few months away from our first female president, most likely, we can do a better job as an industry, I think. The way we're going to do that, we're going to do a little case study here. We've got 5 very accomplished female founders here. All of them have raised venture capital money, collectively hundreds of millions of dollars of venture capital money. One has even taken her company public, and all of them have had a profound impact on consumers and the way that we live our lives. So I think certainly one of the ways we can help other female founders is let's see how the winners have done it. And let's not underestimate, though, how unique this panel is. It's been said by some research that women are starting companies at twice the rate of men, yet only 1 out of 12 Series A deals last year had female founders. 1 out of 12. So we talk about unicorns in our business being the companies with billion-dollar valuations. These are the real unicorns in our industry, successful women who founded companies of some note. So I want to start by dissecting some of these unicorns and figure out how they did it. Sheila, you seem to exemplify the notion that necessity is the mother of invention. As many of the panelists here do, by the way. What drove you to start Care.com?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So I started Care.com. I was born and raised in the Philippines and came here for college, and I got pregnant in college. I don't wish it upon your daughters. It was a very difficult journey and struggled with care for most of pretty much our lives, and now I have a 24-year-old. And fast forward, when I was working at a startup, my father was visiting because I begged my parents to take care of our child while I was working at a technology startup, and he fell backwards and had a heart attack. And here I was working in a technology company, but I was using the yellow pages to look for care. And somehow that didn't make sense. And the options, I don't think Craigslist had even launched in the 90s when we were looking for care. And so I thought there had to be a better solution. And what I found is that millions and millions of women, especially women, struggle through the same issues that I struggled with. And how could I use a combination of my education, a combination of my passion, a combination of my experience in the technology space to build the largest online marketplace? So we now serve 18 million members. We're in 16 countries. We took the company public a couple years ago. And so it's something that is also, I get to bring my whole self to work, my authentic self. Because it happens to be that the Philippines is also one of the key sources of caregivers around the world. And I get to bring that to bear in everything that I do as a woman, as a Filipina, as an entrepreneur. And so it really came from sort of a personal experience, Rick.
Speaking of personal experience, the night you took your company public, you had an experience with your son.
You're going to get me like crying on the panel, and I just
tell me what that means to be at that point. What? Oh,
God. We had just taken the company public, and we had a dinner that night with our team, bankers, accountants, and everybody, and of course our kids were there. And I decided to do an open mic, thinking that because some of our early employees we had invited to join us. But I was surprised at the time when my 22-year-old took the microphone. And he knows that I've struggled through guilt being a working mom and always feeling like I wasn't the perfect mom, not always being around completely because I was founding a company. He took the mic, and I had no idea he was going to say anything that he said. And he said, I want you to know that everything you're doing is making a difference in people's lives. And that means more than anything to Adam and I. And I was bawling. I mean, I was in tears thinking that somehow what I was doing was role modeling for my own children, how important it is for women to pursue their passion and to be leaders, that my own son was impacted. And that was probably one of the most fulfilling moments in my life. And I'm trying not to get emotional. So.
I was told not to make this like The View. I won't. I'm not that guy. Alexandra, you had founded Guilt, very successful company, the toast of New York. People loved what you're doing, but then you saw an opportunity with Glam Squad. What is Glam Squad, and why go and lead that?
Sure. So we co-founded Guilt. We were a team of 5 co-founders back in 2007. And I had been at the company for 7 years and loved the company, still love the company very much today. It's so much a part of me and who I am and my professional journey. But like many entrepreneurs, I had found myself a little bit curious as to what the next path would be after Guilt. And I realized along the way that I truly love the early stage process of building a company, of pursuing ideas, of being able to really innovate without politics, without having to go through big company protocols and sometimes bureaucracy. And along the way, I graduated from HBS in 2004. I had found, given that the spirit of the conversation is women's entrepreneurship, I had found myself mentoring and becoming an advisor in a lot of amazing female-founded and led startups coming out of Harvard Business School, including companies like Rent the Runway and Birchbox. And so I was always very open to mentoring and getting involved in helping others the way I wished people had helped me in our early days of Guilt, and got together with 2 of my Glam Squad co-founders, Jason Perry and David Goldweitz. They had already launched Glam Squad. We were at a Harvard undergrad tech event in New York at Google's offices, and they told me about the concept, which was about 6 weeks old. And what Glam Squad is we deliver beauty services in 3 cities today, New York, LA, Miami. So hair, makeup, and nail services, very high quality services at a relatively affordable price. So $50 blowouts, $75 makeup, $75 for mani-pedis. And I just got so excited about the concept. Back then it was just hair and just in New York. And I said, this is speaking to me as a consumer. I am a busy professional woman, had been working in fashion/technology, where felt like I needed to look my best for the job, not very good at doing my own hair, not very good at doing my own makeup, and I also have 2 little kids, so I'm totally time-starved, and just saw the immediate potential for the business, so became an advisor in the company, and a few months later, they convinced me to join the company full-time as a CEO, and they brought me in as a co-founder as well, and it's been an amazing ride. The business launched 2 years ago. We've raised our Series B, and we're growing incredibly quickly. So it's been a lot of fun. And this is the stage of a company that I think I love the most, and I think where I can add the most value.
So, and you raised how much money?
24 million.
24 million. You raised 111 million?
200 million.
Of venture, and then the public.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 200 million. Okay, Jessica, you had actress and model on your resume.
I wasn't a model.
That's what it says in Wikipedia. That's all it says.
Wikipedia is
That's all it
not
says.
right, guys.
You added
that your fact-checking?
you added businesswoman on there. What was it about the core business, the problem that you saw? Why put your brand and your power behind a new company?
I mean, it really came out of my authentic experience, like everyone here, as a conscious consumer. I was aware that at the time when I became a new mom and I did a lot of research, that there are lots of untested and potentially harmful chemicals in your everyday life. And basically there is no real process in the United States to protect us from them. So basically, they don't need to be tested for safety before they're put in a product and they're in your home. Where in Europe, it's kind of the opposite of that. They have to be tested for safety before they can be put in a product. And so I was like, that's strange. So, you know, the rise of all of these illnesses that are connected to these potentially harmful chemicals that are in your everyday environment really have coincided. The rise of everything from, you know, allergies and asthma to mental disabilities like ADHD, autism, to infertility, to cancers. And so I was a new mom, and I really wanted to protect my family from being sick. I was a really sick child. I don't know if people know that. I spent a lot
That was on Wikipedia, by the way. The asthma,
right.
the collapsed lung.
I was very sick when I was a kid, and when I, you know, was faced with having to keep this little person alive, I just wanted her to be healthy, and I wanted to create the best and safest and healthiest environment. And I looked around at the marketplace, and I found that if it was an alternative product, it was 4 times more expensive, and it didn't really work. Or it was a conventional product, and I would have an allergic reaction to it myself, or it wasn't necessarily made with the quality of ingredients that I wanted. And there really wasn't the combination of the two. And then so the affordability, the convenience of getting it delivered to your door was really important to me, because all of a sudden I was like, I don't know, like, especially in the beginning, I didn't know how to leave the house in under an hour with, like, I was like always missing something, going back, and then it was time to feed again, and then she, you know, her diaper, and it was stressful. So I just wanted the convenience of being it delivered straight to your door, and, you know, your essential items that you need to clean your home, clean your kid, clean yourself, and diaper your kid. And so that's where the Honest Company came from.
Great. Susan, you had a very successful career in the garment industry, if I believe what I can read now, which I apparently can't believe anything.
Check.
Fact check that. But you started One Kings Lane, raised money from Kleiner Perkins and other notable investors. What drove you to do that? What drove you to become that entrepreneur and the founder and change the world in that way? And what is One Kings Lane?
So One Kings Lane is, well, I think it's the greatest place to shop for your home. It's a place that is, it started out as a flash sale, which I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, which Alexander knows a lot about, but has now really evolved into just a great destination where you can find really terrific things for your home. It's probably the most unique assortment of merchandise. I haven't found another store online or offline that carries the kind of mix of products that we do, from, you know, new products, designer products, vintage products. But what had actually happened is not all unlike what the stories you have heard here. I lived most of my adult life in Manhattan in an apartment. It was a nice apartment. But about 10 years ago, we moved to Los Angeles, and we bought a house in West Hollywood. And I went kind of crazy. It felt like somebody had let me loose. I realized I hadn't been living in a house since I had left my parents' home to go to college, which was a long time. And all of a sudden, I had, you know, rooms to decorate, backyard to entertain in. It was, I was really having a great time with it and becoming rather obsessed with, you know, what I could do in this home, whether it's decorating or entertaining. And at the time back then, which was in 2007, early 2008, online was pretty much Amazon. So if you knew what you wanted, it was great. But if you were looking for something unique and different, there really was no place to go online. offline. There were fabulous stores here in Los Angeles, but again, it took time, and I was busy, and I was working, and to go store by store just wasn't, the experience that I was looking for. And so it seemed like there was a really large white space that if somebody could go out and find great product and merchandise it and sort of do the heavy lifting for the consumer, that there was an opportunity to disrupt a space which at the time was not very tech savvy at all. A lot of the vendors that we worked with in the very beginning didn't even have their own websites when we started working with them. So I was really passionate about this. It was something that was driving me crazy. I kept thinking there was an opportunity there. And I didn't want to go it alone, actually. So I partnered with a woman who's my co-founder, Allie Pincus, which I think was really helpful to have a partner in crime in doing this. And by the way, it was the height of the recession when we decided to do this. So most people thought we were a little bit out of our minds. And we actually didn't raise any capital when we started. We bootstrapped the business ourselves and thought, we'll make a go of it and see if we can make it work, and kind of put our blinders on, ignored the fact that the world was basically, crashing around us, and started the site, launched One Kings Lane in March 2009 as a flash sale site, which meant every day was a different day on One Kings Lane, and we had product that was there for a limited amount of time for limited quantities. But as the business grew, our consumer, grew to really love what we were doing and really wanted us to, be there and be more of a reliable destination. So when she needed something, like she needed white sheets or towels, she could come instead of having to wait to the day that we featured it. And so the business now has really, evolved away from that, and we have, we have amazing merchandise, and it's there for extended period of time. We have fantastic content. So we, wrap around this great assortment with, all kinds of great information of how you can use it and what you can do with it, and hopefully inspire you to create the home that you love.
Do you think, by the way, having a female founder was important as opposed to a male founder? Did that matter to you at all?
I think what was important is that Allie was as passionate as I was about the home space, so it could have been a guy, but it was great that it was a woman, and we did it together.
Great. Debbie, we're coming to
Hi.
you, all the way from London.
Hello. Thanks
Tell
for
us about
having me.
Love Home Swap.
What I think is fascinating about this panel, by the way, I wonder how this would be if it were a male panel, because everyone has a very personal story, don't they, about how they came up with the thing. I think it's just interesting to reflect on that. So my version of this is that I had always traveled so much for work and life, and then I had my children, and I went on a holiday to the Caribbean to stay in a very expensive hotel when they were very, very tiny, and we did that thing of sitting in a room with the lights off because we didn't want to wake them up, and feeding and eating room service, and it was just a really bad experience. What I wanted to do at that time was to be in my home. I just didn't want to be in my home in London. I wanted to be somewhere with decent weather. And on the flight, on the way back, I watched, with extreme jet lag, the movie The Holiday, for those of you who have seen it. And which is not an amazing film, but I thought, does that even exist? Cameron Diaz swaps homes with Kate Winslet. She's in England. Cameron Diaz is over here. Because actually, that's the holiday that I wish I just had. I wish I had been able to stay in a home. I wish that I hadn't spent all the money that I'd spent on an experience that didn't work, whilst at the time, my home in London was sitting empty. And also, there was a notion, particularly at that time with very small children, that I wish I could swap my life for someone else for a few weeks. That's what I wanted to do. And that was the idea behind Love Home Swap. And this is the beginning of 2011. So since then, we've been very fortunate to build a business which is global in its scope. It's based in London, but is very international. We have now over 100,000 homes, primarily families, but also empty nesters, people whose children have left home, who want to travel the world more. We're part of the sharing economy, and we have absolutely been part of a movement, if you like, which has included people like Airbnb and Uber, depending on where your politics lie on that one. But I think that what we're benefiting from, which I think is also relevant for this panel, is people thinking about the assets that they own in a different way. And the people who are driving the sharing economy are women. That's because they're at home often. That's because they make the decisions about travel and anything to do with the home. And so one of the things that's fantastic about my business and the members that we have is that they're a very strong, very vocal, very visual, very empowering female membership base. And that's the business that I have grown and I'm still growing.
Awesome. So let's take a look at the problems facing female entrepreneurs today. It's easy to be kind of seduced by this panel into thinking that things are great. You guys have raised hundreds of millions, have done great. It's not that easy for everyone else. And you look at in LA, you have Upfront and Graycroft, both with female partners. My firm has female investment professional. Seems like we're moving in the right direction, yet only 1 out of 12 companies are female-led. That sounds like a problem. Alexandra, does the tech industry have a bias against women?
Well, first of all, it's not my personality to be saying, cry me a river. I'm not here to be complaining in any way, shape, or form, but you're asking me the question. So yes, we do have a problem. And I think we're all here because we want to make it better. And it is getting better. And it's so much better than back in 2007 when we were just starting out with Guilt. And I was looking for role models and mentors. And I just didn't know of any female founders. I'm sure they existed, but I didn't even know who to aspire to be. I think that there are a few challenges. One is the reality of the VC community is that it is an old boys network. And it is improving and it is changing. But I think from an investor perspective, many investors that I know are typically going to invest in companies and industries that they inherently understand, that they're inherently passionate about, where they can also add potentially strategic value. And it's harder for a man to do that investing in a female-focused company, which is just a reality, and that's okay. So, in the case of Glam Squad, our two biggest investors, NEA and SoftBank, the actual investors and partners who sit on our board happen to be women, and I happen to have known them for a long time, Marissa Campisi and Dana Grayson, and I don't think that's an accident. I think even though they're not necessarily the exact demo that we were going after, and they understood the potential for our businesses. So I think that as we see more women going into VC, as we see more examples of large, big ideas being founded or led by women, I think that it's going to get better, and it's all of our jobs to improve it for everyone else who's coming up behind us.
I think there's also a point there, isn't there, about the female ecosystem and what all of us can do in terms of investing in women-led businesses and advising and mentoring women who want to get started. Because it obviously is about big firms, but I think that it's also about how people get started. And definitely from a UK perspective, the challenge is at the very earliest stage, which is where women just don't have the contacts. They don't know where to go to raise seed finance. They're not able to pull in the address book in the same way. So the more that we, as successful women who are having exits, pay it forward and we put our hands up and we're public in saying we back women, which is something that I do in the UK, and I'm proud to say that I only back female founders of tech businesses as an angel, because someone has to say that that's what they're doing. And I think if we do that and we're able to get people started, then there's more of a virtuous circle than just relying on raising that later stage of capital.
Jessica, you told me mentorship is important to female founders and a stronger even network beyond the mentor. Tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you both of you ladies wholeheartedly. I really only knew one person who had founded a company and grew it. She's in the fashion industry, Tory Burch, and even though we have very different businesses, I did apply a lot of her advice on even just like, I've never been to a board meeting before. Like, I didn't even know what that meant. Like, I didn't know what it meant to my business to have outside investors, like just basic things that you know as an entrepreneur if you've done it before. I just had no idea what the implications of what any of that meant, and it was so helpful to have someone who had been around the block and who had done those things, just to have as a sounding board, because sometimes you feel like you're going crazy or you're talking in circles, and you don't understand just even the politics of raising outside capital and what that could possibly mean to you personally in your day-to-day and how you run the business, and what it means to the future of your business. So I think it's incredibly important, and it's something that I do as well. I've been fortunate enough that I do get a lot of young entrepreneurs coming and asking me for advice and wanting me to join their boards or at least advising them and investing in their companies. And it's really neat to see there are more women who are going out and doing it, and I do see a lot.
What's the right way to approach someone to ask them to be a mentor, and how do you select? Selection is pretty important there.
I think you have to have a real strong sense of the business that you're doing. I think you have to understand the opportunity in the marketplace, understand and simply tackle it. I mean, when it's overcomplicated, it's not as interesting because it's like you feel like they don't even have a grasp on what they're trying to do. Having a strong team around you that can support you is really important. And I think building the company, and this is something that I sort of took for granted just because it was all I knew. My business partner is a serial entrepreneur, and we launched the company with an exit strategy in mind. Now, it's changed along the way, but I think starting your company with that exit strategy in mind makes you desirable for any VC because they feel like you are building a substantial business that can actually turn into something more than this is my passion project. Now I don't know what's going to happen. That's when they sort of turn off. So I think just having a very focused business mind helps in getting my attention or any of our attention.
You mentioned getting, I guess you call it the old boy network. I guess I am the old boy.
You're feeling very outnumbered.
Very lonely up here. Any old boy, I see Brett over there. Old boy's in the audience, my colleague. Somehow, by the way, we invested in Shoe Dazzle, Just Fab, Ipsy, and a lot of more female-oriented companies, Boone and Gable. So I want to hit on, though, it is harder for people, I think, to relate to companies that are different than what they're used to seeing, right, in your personal life or professional. And one of our female CEOs said, Rick, ask this panel, did you have a harder time getting to an aha moment? Maybe you had female VCs you were approaching, but 93% of partners at firms are male. Yeah. So is it harder to get the old boy to an aha moment to say, oh, I get it. I get what you're doing here. Yes. Tell me about it.
No, I mean,
amplifying it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Like I said, Allie and I bootstrapped our business, but when we went out to do our Series A, we had actually a lot of inbound interest because our business took off very quickly, and we had, really great proof of concept. But when we got in front, went to see all these VCs, you could just sort of see they're looking at these great numbers, but they're not like understanding at all what it meant. And actually, we had one experience where we got a term sheet from somebody that we actually really wanted to, lead the A. We really liked them. And they gave us a terrible term sheet. And, we said, sorry, but, we can't make this work. And they weren't willing to negotiate it. And the guy called me 3 months later. He said, my wife is so mad at me that I didn't invest in One Kings Lane. I said, well, you should have probably talked to her before you gave us that term sheet. But I think, trying to get their attention and get them to understand something, sort of to your point, that they're not using can be really challenging. And I think to try to impress upon them to have a conversation with people that use it is probably one of the better ways, I guess, to help them understand that it's something that's very viable. People love it. The numbers are not like made up. They're real because it's a great business and they should invest in it.
I'd love to build on that.
Sure.
You know, when I first started CARE, I was actually contemplating not doing it and parking the business plan, because I went to see a very good friend of mine who's in one of the top investment banks, and asked her for advice. And she said, I can't believe you've got these dual degrees from Harvard and you're going to go start a babysitting company. Like, why would you go do that? I was so worried about how I was being judged and perceived. You know, my friend Francine here started saying, Sky, I'm wearing her necklace. And she just is so passionate. She was talking the other day about, I can't believe my second career is jewelry. And for CARE, it was something similar that I was going through. It's sort of like, I'm going to do a female-centric business, and I'm going to get judged. And then I talked to a male VC. In fact, who sat me down and said, we love your business plan. We want to fund it. Same investors that we had. Matrix, and said, are you in the pain business or the pleasure business? Had asked me the question that throughout my career, I'd been helping solve consumer problems, save money for college, find jobs, find care. Not that fun, right? And so it was solving consumer pain versus focus on sort of what pleasure, because I was thinking about being a CEO of a hot mobile company and parking my business plan. So here I was struggling with my own perception that I was going to be judged in a very male-dominated industry, but just sheer passion, I decided to pursue it. But here's the funny thing. Not only did we struggle to kind of express the importance of CARE, it's often described as a soft issue, with investors. Let me just ask a quick question of the audience. How many of you guys have kids? How many of you have nieces and nephews? How many of you been kids? So for anyone to tell me that CARE is a woman's issue, it's a soft issue and all of that, and trying to explain that to investors was very difficult. But here's the thing, now that we're public, what's interesting is that it's still the same challenge 10 years later for me. And now that the company is profitable 2 quarters in a row, and we just shared with the street an expectation of sustained profitability, that now they're paying attention. But it's been a struggle to say CARE is so important to people and why they can't fathom that that's such a great business model, the total addressable market of this thing. It's $280 billion a year. But it's been a challenge to convince. And one of our lead analysts, a public analyst, said to me, he said at the very beginning, coached me and said, you're going to struggle for a few years. It's funny, your metrics are very similar to OpenTable when they went public. They were also not profitable, had similar growth trajectory. But because the male analysts used OpenTable, right, they valued it. They got it. Mm-hmm. And because they don't understand CARE, so it became proof is in the pudding. It was sort of show the profitability. It's a show me model. And then figure it out. But why is that the case? Why is that the case for female-led, focused companies around female-centric products? And then when I raise this, I have some male investors say, oh my God, that's just such an excuse. But it's real. It's a challenge that we face. And I'm not trying to say that it's an excuse. But the reality is we need more men to understand and believe even in things that they don't experience in their lives. And because there's so many more of them as investors, how can we promote and fund more female entrepreneurs if they're not going to take a leap?
You'd actually think they would figure out it might be an opportunity for them.
So let's talk about that for a second. Al Gore was talking yesterday about moral imperative versus financial imperative, right? We have, the old boys have the power. We have the power to invest. We could invest solely in women companies if we wanted to, but we're supposed to drive the best returns for our investors.
Oh, yeah.
There's an argument that you can do the same. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can invest in and find great opportunities in female-driven companies, maybe because others don't understand it. Maybe there's even more of an opportunity there. But do you believe, maybe that's an easy statement, is a harder statement is, should we give some weight to whether the company has a female founder or not? As someone who has outside money driving returns, do we give that moral imperative or financial imperative weight?
I think you have to treat women fairly and equally, but if a woman is founding a company where her target demo is the person that's controlling over 70% of the household income, then I think she might know a little bit more about what she's doing, maybe, than the man.
I mean, I don't know. I agree with that. I think that at the end of the day, if you're an investor and you have LPs, you're going to invest in the businesses that have the best potential. And that is your job. That is what you're there to do. But I just think that the more VCs that are out there that are men that are supporting women, and there are a lot, people like yourself, people like Tony Florence, people like Nick Bime. There are a lot of these guys out there who are, if anything, they're probably more open-minded about investing in, it's not that it's female-founded or centric or focused, it's big business ideas that the other VCs aren't paying attention to. So it's a competitive advantage. And I think, just as a VC is going to do their massive amount of due diligence around an idea, around the TAM, around the founding team, the entrepreneurs are back channeling and doing all of their homework around a potential investor too. And the more men that are out there that get reputations to being supportive of women and encouraging, and it benefits everyone.
I do think that this is an area that benefits from a female focus, though. I think that we should think about and help to support more funds that are focused on investing in women, more funds that are focused on hiring female partners to be venture partners in the funds, more funds, even at an early stage, that are focused on only investing in women. I do think it's an area where if we focus and if we pull people with us through ensuring that we're not just thinking about the money. I mean, that's what's really interesting when you try to delve into some of the data on why don't women found more businesses. Some of the stuff that we've talked about already to do with network, to do with there being a lot of men rather than women investing, to do with men not necessarily understanding women businesses, all of those are important. But there's a load of softer stuff too around confidence, around role models, around your business, which is for most women who are looking at founding businesses, the mean age of doing that is in your 30s. And that's where you have young kids. And as a founder, you earn, 50 cents and a pat on the back for a really quite a long time. So there are some very structural issues around how can we make it easier for women to get started, of which care is actually a really big one of them. And it's something within the UK that we're trying to find different ways of addressing, because if you're asking women to pay to work, essentially, in order to found a business, then you're already ensuring that the group of people who can do that, who want to do that, who can afford to do that, is shrinking. And I think for me, I'm a single mum. At the time when I started Love Home Swap, it was tough, right? Because if you're focused on all of your different responsibilities and paying for childcare and being the innovator and being the founder CEO, that's hard. So it feels like focusing on the money and on what male VCs think is only half of the conversation. We also need to focus on the ecosystem and what we're doing to support women in order to help them get going.
You mentioned before, how important was it? How did you juggle I want a family, I'm going to start a company, I want to do all that?
Yes.
That's something that, at least in today's society, men generally don't have to think about that.
Yes.
Women are expected to think about that.
Yes. I think
maybe wrongly, but they're expected to.
No, I think that's right. I think it would be helpful to make a better choice of husband. I think that was probably just looking back.
So when you started Love Home Swap, you initially were just going to switch yourself out of the home.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah.
Look, I think it's tough, and I think again we've talked a lot about role models. One of the things that I often talk about on these platforms is my mother and my grandmother. I'm from a Jewish immigrant family to the UK where my grandmother ran a business, my mother ran a business. You know what you know, right? So for me, that was just what people did. I never really saw anyone going to a job because that wasn't what anybody in my family did. And my grandmother, who died last year, age 97, was working right up until the end. And she used to run a chain of sweet shops and off licenses and drive the van around, and we used to drop the money. And so that's what you know. So I think for me, it wasn't really a choice, but I think one of the things that helps and one of the things that female entrepreneurs should be focused on and give them confidence is if you're the boss, you get to make the decisions. So for me, I just took my children into the office with me, which looking back on it was completely nuts. But I just did it, and nobody, I was the boss. What was anybody going to do or say about the fact? And I turned up to a lot of meetings with VCs, with lawyers, with the child with me, and people just sort of went with it. and thought she's quite eccentric, but that's okay. So I think, what's the point? The point to all of that is it isn't very easy, and I'm sure everyone on the panel will have their war stories about where it doesn't just work out. But I thought what was really interesting, generally on these panels, we talk about guilt in some shape or form. I think the thing for me is that I was just determined that I wouldn't feel any guilt, and I don't. I feel like I'm doing the best thing for me, and I'm doing the best thing for my children, and I'm being the best role model that I can. I have a boy and a girl for different reasons. For them to see their mother working, at either gender is important. That felt like a long-winded answer, but I think somewhere in there, hopefully, there's things that people relate to.
Any thoughts on that? We'll move on?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Before I leave the topic, so far, the old boy network, this sounds like we're ignorant, which is fine, because we can get educated. But is there more blatant Donald Trump-type sexism that you've run across in raising money? Maybe not that bad.
Not to call anyone out specifically.
No, I'm just saying, as a term. But well, I don't want to get into politics, but to say that Hillary's only there because she's a woman doesn't seem fair to females. So, but in the extreme, have you run across more of that? Or is it more the ignorance, they just don't understand the kind of companies that we're starting? Susan?
I mean, for me, it's been more that they just don't understand. They're not, shopping and decorating their homes, so that was challenging for them.
They're not
to
the
understand.
customer.
They're not the customer, exactly, totally.
Yeah, I don't have any
crazy
war
stories.
sexism stories, but I
Or horror
think for
stories.
both Guilt and Glam Squad, Guilt, I remember one male VC we went through a whole deck, we'd prepared it, and I was in charge of merchandising, so going through slides, and it was, of all the things he could have been shaking his head about, like, I just don't understand, it was like, women don't spend $500 on shoes. They just don't. I can't believe it. And I was like, of all the things you could criticize, like that, and I was like, well, you're wrong, and ask your wife tonight when you go home. And then he emailed me like I was wrong. And then the other,
Only 500.
Yeah, that's it.
Another pair of black shoes. Yes.
And then with Glam Squad being in a VC meeting and a really smart, super successful venture capital male, very successful, his sort of scratching the comment question when we were talking about how today's woman is multitasking, whether she's a mother, a professional, young, social, whatever it is, juggling childcare. He couldn't understand how a woman could get a blowout and do work at the same time. And, like on her laptop or on a conference call, multitasking. And I was like, do you think it's like a facial or a massage that, you're sitting in a chair and having your hair done? So he didn't really understand that either. But no, I haven't had the really horror stories.
Okay, so other ways that females can be encouraged, I guess, to enter the industry. Jessica, we talked a little bit about STEM, science and technology, engineering, math. Mayor Garcetti says he's working on some programs. Are you working with him on some of those? Or?
Yeah, so we have, actually something did happen in my first board meeting. One of the seed investors said, okay, so you're good for people, you're making products that are good for the environment, they're affordably priced, they're beautifully designed, convenient to get, and you want to give back. The give back is just too much. You can't do everything. And I was like, no, but I really think that that is something that is important to the millennials. And I think that if you had an option between this and that, if this is actually giving back to the community, I think it will affect the way that someone makes their choices and where they want to spend their money and companies they want to support. So in that, we do give back. It's actually embedded in the business model. And I did say, by the next board meeting, if our business is going like this, then we'll throw it out and we'll reconsider. But of course, I was going like this, so thank God I got to keep it. And part of our give back in beauty, so we have a beauty company called honestbeauty.com, or just Honest Beauty, and we give back to Girls Who Code and code.org. And we've actually mentored 15 to 17-year-old girls at our office different disciplines in technology. In my office, they've taught them UI, UX design, how to code in different languages, and these girls actually created their own app, and they wanted to create, all of them wanted to create apps that tackled social issues that are important to them in the world. So that's where the 15 and 17-year-olds are thinking, which I think is super cool. And so I was like, what if everyone had access to these skills? I mean, it really should be part of basic curriculum in schools. So I've been advocating, and we've been putting money towards trying to get these skills embedded in the basic curriculum across the country in schools. So it is really important, and I want more technologists that are more engineers that are female. I think it's important to have more diversity in technology. So, yeah.
Great. Shift gears a little bit here. Sheila, you mentioned you think women hold themselves potentially to a higher standard than the same male founder might, and that might inhibit their progress. What do you mean by that?
So obviously I touched on the perception. I call it sort of the 3 Ps. One is that perception example of holding yourself back because you're worried about being judged, especially in a male-dominated industry that you're getting into. The other one I call is perfection. I think that women in general, and this is the thing that we're talking about, confidence and just realizing what you could be doing. And we generally, I'm going to generalize, but there is this tendency in our personal lives, as an example, like I want the house absolutely clean, dishes put away before I can go out and enjoy the weekend. I don't know how many women experience that, but whenever I ask, a lot of raised hands. And we do that in our careers. We wait for all the boxes to be checked. And I experience that. And with the women that I mentor or sponsor or champion, I like what the Secretary of Treasury said, champion, I hear this a lot, that I'm not ready, even though a lot of the experience is already there. But when you ask a man if he's ready to be a director or a VP, a GM or a CEO, he's just like, I'm ready to go. You know, and a woman, on the other hand, and I know this, and it might be anecdotal, but I think the data shows that women, on the other hand, wait. They wait until all those boxes are checked, and we hold ourselves back. And that includes the 3rd P that I call is passivity. We often sit, and I learned this through my own journey, I'll sit in a conference room when I was a lot younger, I'll think of a point, I'm too nervous or worried about how I'm gonna be judged when I make that point, and 10 minutes later, a guy makes the point, and I'm like, why didn't I raise it? So now when I mentor, champion, I like that word, women, I encourage them to overproject. I encourage them to experiment with their voice in the room, in my meetings. I have a lot of women in the company, and just say, push yourself, figure out exactly how you can influence, how to use your voice, how to have more advocacy, because it teaches you to be a leader. Now that overprojection might be viewed in other companies as pushy, the B word and all of that, but in fact, it's important to find yourself as a leader and to go through that journey. And so these are the kinds of things that I think as champions we need to be. But something today at the McKinsey, there was a private session where they shared their data that I just learned something completely new that I didn't realize. I go to a lot of women's conferences. I speak and I try and encourage women to be role models. But what the data showed today is that at an entry level and at all different points throughout the career, a woman actually will enter the workforce with the belief that there won't be equal parity and opportunity for her, right? And that's like entry level 42% when surveyed. Men believe that there are no gender parity issues. 11% believe that there are. 11%. And yet, if so many more men are the real leaders in an organization, as we see in the pipeline, they're the ones who are actually going to help women up right now. They're the ones mentoring. They're the ones we're counting on to be champions so that we can improve that pipeline. So I feel like I'm talking to the wrong audience. We need to be talking to more men. Right? That's what's holding us back. It's absolutely, I completely agree, Cheryl, lean in. I agree with there's confidence, and I've gone through my own personal experience. I'll own my own stuff. was going to say something else. I own my own stuff. But what I realize is to try and have gender parity, given where we're at right now, we need more men. I'm appealing to you guys. The men, it's great to see a lot of men in the audience. We need you to mentor and champion women to help us with gender parity. That's what we really need to be pushing. Not that I'm minimizing, there's just not enough women at the top to have more role models. There's not enough of us who can pull up. And so if we ever really want true 50-50, we need more men beyond the barriers that I think women go through.
Thank you. And to be honest, some of the men are in the audience because I said there was a model on the panel, but I was wrong. So we got 8 minutes and 10 seconds left. I want you guys to tell me what's the best advice you got as you entered entrepreneurship, and or what's the best advice you would give to someone who's a female who's founding a company today?
Gosh, that's hard. Two things, I think, a practical thing and a temperament headspace thing. The very practical thing is get up early. If you're not an early riser in this game, forget it. And there are people who are not naturally early risers. So I think when people ask for practical advice about how do you do it all and how do you juggle, and I get up at something with a 5 in the number, and without that, I wouldn't be able to do it all. So train yourself to be an early riser. And the second thing, which I've always held close when you're going through tough times, when when it's just not working or you're not, is that it's far more about the grit than it is about the inspiration. So of course the original idea matters, and everyone on the panel has talked about their moment, and I think women are maybe a bit more open to that moment than men. But it's the grit, and it's just keeping going when you have day after day when there's lots of news and none of it's good. So I think just being prepared for that and having that, building that into your DNA is super important, because I think there's such a buzz from the early days, and we've all loved it in our own way, and that's why I love starting new things and investing, but it's the keeping going and the grit that makes the difference.
I would say that when we were starting out Guild and we were 5 co-founders, one of my co-founders was one of my best friends and still is one of my best friends, Alexis Maybank, and Kevin Ryan, who was our co-founder and chairman. His advice to us was to really make sure that the business didn't completely take over the friendship. And I think he said something, or we remember that he said, don't let the business businessify your friendship. And I think that was really great and important advice. And we're still very close to each other. She's working on a new startup. We're supporting one another. We're godmothers to each other's kids. And you hear a lot of stories of female co-founders and cattiness, and life's too short for that. So I think it's really important. And when you start something with someone that you trust, you really know that you have each other's back. And I think in a startup, it's hand-to-hand combat daily. You don't have time to waste. And I think, startups are really hard. We all know that. And I think that I always try to surround myself around the people who are the uppers in my life, and just to stay away from the negative, pessimistic, glass half empty, sort of toxic people. So if you have those in your life and you're in an early stage company where all odds are against you, don't spend time with the people who are going to tell you all the reasons why you're going to fail.
I love that. Sheila?
So my quick story, we were doing a non-deal roadshow prior to going public, and barely any bathroom time breaks and stuff, and we'd flown into an airport, and it was the only time the investors were going to meet with us. So I go run to do a buy break, come back, and I go to the coffee pot because I got to go stay awake for this meeting, and I offer everybody in the room coffee. And then the introduction starts. CTO shakes hands. CFO of Care.com shakes hands, gets to me, and the banker says, "You must be the assistant from the bank." And my response was, no, I'm founder, CEO, and chairwoman of Care.com. Thank you so much for taking this meeting. And I think we all have, many of you will have your own stories, regardless of gender, I think, of being underestimated. And I call this my Katniss moment. and I do an actual speech on it, on the superhero moment that you have and finding this inner strength of your authentic self. And that for women, I think, is what I call these opposing forces. You can be creative and analytical. You could be driven and collaborative. You know, you could bring your whole self to work. And I used to separate those things. I can be my mom, nurturing at home. Now, I can kiss my sons to bed, but I can also have a ferocious look when they're bothering me when I'm on the cell phone, asking me to go play a video game. Like, I can be both. Why can't I do that in the workplace? Is be this authentic self. And related to being a superhero, and a big believer of this, especially for women, because there's so few of us, is to find things like Francine, things that you become passionate about to create significance and impact in the world. I believe in this so much, and for me, McKinsey, there's a study that says that if you equate female participation in the workplace for men, $28 trillion, the size of US and China. So for me, yes, childcare supports, and this is a mission that we have, but I'm trying to find ways in which I bring more women and men to contribute to society that's making an impact. And so that drives you, the grit, the getting up early, you know, the respect that you have for your co-founders, whatever it is, I do think it has so much to do that given purpose to make a meaningful difference. And I met a young woman, and I love doing this yesterday, Kendra, and keep doing what you're doing because you can tell that's the passion that you have in your heart to make a meaningful difference for so many lives in Africa. And I love that. So that would be my advice.
Thank you.
I was given 2 pieces of advice when we started our company that I think I would pass along, which one was, you know, whatever you're going to do, move quickly. So I think this speaks a little bit to the perfection syndrome. You know, whatever you're going to do, it's never going to be perfect when you launch. So you might as well get out there with, you know, the best product that you can and keep iterating and move as fast as you can, especially in today's world where everything's changing so quickly. I think the second piece was be authentic. So if you have a vision and a dream, like be authentic to that and don't let somebody else try to, you know, change whatever that is. You should be true to that because if you're true and your passion will, you know, shine through, I think you'll be a success. Whereas I think if you're not, I think people, you know, will see right through it right away. And I think the last thing that I would say that I've learned through this journey is trust your intuition. Because if you're the founder and the person that has had this dream, I would say probably almost 10 out of 10 times your intuition will be right.
Jessica?
I would say one of them is definitely surround yourself with people who are smarter than you and experts and who have done it before as much as you can. Learn from them. I would also say that don't let your failures define you. They actually prepare you for the next step. I was rejected 3 times for 3 years, including from my co-founder. And then I went and pitched him again 18 months later, and he joined me in the company. It was after he had a child and he realized that he wasn't the only one in the world. But, you know, it was at the right time for him to join me in the company. So I think don't let your failures define you. Don't be afraid to try it. You just have to try it. Women, we just have to try it. I think the fear of failing and not even trying we need to throw it out and get rid of it because it won't do us any good, and you only have this one life to go out there and do what you can.
So it's time to wrap up. I really appreciate the time and effort you guys have put into this. I certainly appreciate the time the audience
Oh,
has.
the cartoon.
Oh, the cartoon, yes.
They don't
Is
see
it up?
the cartoon.
Can we throw up a... There you go.
So
Jessica, what's going on?
someone interviewed me yesterday, and he said, what do you think of this cartoon? And he wanted to talk about women in the workplace. And you can see the opponent quit whining. It's the same distance. Clearly, it's not. But at the same time, if you're constantly looking to the left or to the right, you're never going to get to the finish line. So regardless of your obstacles, whatever it took for you to get there is going to make you stronger, and you matter more than anyone else to get there and to be there. And so I think you have to find confidence in your journey and not be held back by your obstacles in getting there. So
I'm dropping the mic on that. Thank you.
Thank you.